Okay, welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. This is where we time the market without predicting it. We use price action. We look at trends. We find those reversal points so we can get in early. Not at the bottom, but early. And so we're talking about cannabis stocks here. We had that announcement from Biden, and then there was another sort of announcement from someone running for the governor of Texas. Just in general, obviously people are, cannabis is popular, so politicians are playing on it. So we had a huge pop in a lot of cannabis stocks, and I'm going to look at just a smattering of them: Tilray, Canopy Growth, Kronos, etc. So we'll start with Tilray, and we'll look at the daily chart. This is a helpful kind of concept, and it's October 8th. So we're looking at, so it was October, so Wednesday, it was, Thursday, we got that big pop, right? So we got that big pop on Thursday, the announcement, and then Friday is where we closed. And then we'll see, obviously, what happens next week. But in this case, we went from, call it 291 all the way up to like 393, right? So a huge move. A $1 move on a less than $3 stock in a day, that's over 30%, right? Easy math. And then the next day, we actually made a higher high, right? And then we failed. We came down lower, right? So we went up to over $4, and then we actually closed at 313. Or we didn't close, we closed a little bit above that. But we didn't get below the 291 yet. But that's the level you're watching for, right? Like, getting below that level is your full reversal, and now we're just going lower. And more importantly, thinking about the structure of the chart, this is so incredibly important. In a downtrend, price makes lower lows and lower highs. You have to remember about those lower highs, right? Like, that's important. Like, it's like this thing is a lower high. So that's actually a higher high, right? So that's a fake out. Now, probably sucked a lot of people in, right? You can see these moves, right? That was a massive lower high. We chopped around here. Now we started making, and then this is right. So, like, just think about that in the sense that this whole way it's sliding lower, but you have these pops, right? Like, you can, and another way to look at them is by drawing, another way to kind of think about it is by drawing like a, what do you call it? A little arrow, right? So, like, you can see them, right? These little points where price pops up. And that could just become another one of them, right? Like, another point along the way where price pops up and just fails to follow through. And that's what we're starting to see here, right? Because, and as I posted on Twitter, and if you're not following me on Twitter, definitely take a look at the link in the description for more real time. Basically, there were four stocks that in the marijuana sector that did not completely give everything up. I mean, in this case, this didn't give it up. We need to go below like the 291 area, and we're going to see what happens on Monday. And then let's look at the weekly chart, right? So that was a daily. We we basically took out all of these lows in like one shot, right? But then we came back and failed, and so important concept to understand. Next week is going to be an inside week. We're going to really want to see what happens within that range, right? Like, what happens? How do we get outside of the range of this candle? That's what you're going to want to watch for. That's on your weekly. Your monthly has gone green, but also important to understand. Last week was the first week of the month, so the weekly candle and the monthly candle are basically the same. So it doesn't really make a big difference. So it's essentially the same price action until we get a new weekly candle. So that's Tilray. If we look at Canopy, this is a perfect example. That is a case where, and I'll go back to auto, pardon me, right? Like, look at this, just being clear. This candle made all of this progress, this green candle, on Thursday, and then it got wiped out the next day. Remember, in the case of Tilray, Friday it made a higher high and then it went red. In this case, it did not even make that higher high. It just went red and just failed, and we made the lower low. So in this case, the downtrend has already resumed. This kind of lower high is already like, I mean, obviously anything could happen. We could get a big green candle that just wipes all of that out. I mean, we'll see how like that doesn't seem very likely. So that's an important way to think about it. And if you look at what that looks like on the weekly chart, oof, my God, that is a really bearish looking candle. It almost went red, did not quite do it. But look at this. We just were cascading lower. We needed a higher low, right? We needed a lower high. And so this is our lower high, right? We got our high, but it's lower. Lower than what? Lower than this high, right? And so that's important to understand. As price is going lower, it's going to need to bounce. You can see that's a lower high. That's a lower high. They're just like really short rallies. So that's CCJ. And oh my God, on the monthly, you can see it's essentially like a really big bear flag. Now, very clear kind of risk reward. It depends on how much room you want to give it. You know, you could call it like the 245 area, or you could say, you know what, I'm just going to give it a lot of room. I'll say like 207, even call it $2 even, because the all-time low is $1. So if you were to cut your if you were to cut your losses at 2, you'd still be saving yourself more than a 50% decline from there. And you can see the 10 month moving average is just sloping down massively, just bad news bears. So that's CCJ, Kronos, same thing. See, rejected. It made a new lower low, and in this case, the weekly candle already went red, right? Not wasting any time. In some cases, I mean, you could call these potential shorts. This is an OTC thing, so the candles look a little janky. What is this? Green Organic Dutchman Holdings. We'll skip over this one. ACB, let's look at this. So, yep. In this case, we'll zoom in just to make sure we're crystal clear. Same pattern. I hope we're seeing this. We made a lower low. So this like little 1 day pop was a lower high. Dead cat bounce. Same kind of idea. In this case, the weekly candle is very red, like already. And this was last week, which is just setting up for a more downside this week. And so these 4 are the ones that were more bullish. Let's go through the other ones that are more bearish. Let's do that quickly. Well, that's actually interesting. Oh, actually, Grow Generation, not that bearish, huh? So in Grow Generation, there's more of a picks and shovels play where you can kind of buy equipment for growing stuff. And so here we have this massive green candle that has a range, call it from 350 to 444. So like a $1 move on a $350 stock, that's a $3.50 stock. That's a pretty nice, again, something like 30% in that 1 day period, right? And the next day we did not make a new high, but we also didn't make a new low. And if anything, we're at the upper half of the range, right? And so it's a big range. It's $1 wide, and now we closed at about $4, so 50 cents of downside. But the next kind of cluster of resistance would be around the $6 area. So that's actually, well, that's not true. You could certainly see a case for some resistance here, like around the 488 area, and then around here, like 5, 5.25 to 540, you could call it, and then 6. So there's no way to know exactly how price is going to react at these previous, lower highs, obviously, but that's what you have to kind of anticipate. But in this case, this did not collapse like those other ones. So that's important to note. That's the case where you might have a decent kind of risk reward, depending on your risk tolerance and, time horizon, of course. And on the weekly, it is weekly swing low, or I actually, is that a bullish outside? So 344, 346. Yeah. So this is a bullish outside weekly candle, albeit with some big upper wick, which means we're going to get an inside week next week, but that's a promising start. And the monthly is green, but I mean, this is certainly a bear flag looking kind of thing, so not super auspicious. So MSOS, that is a ETF, and that is actually holding up at the higher end of the range. I'm going to mark this as some potential, right? And the weekly closed out pretty nicely, took out all these lows here. And really what you're watching for is this monthly, right? So a move above like 1350, that might indicate that you're really going to start to move into like up here, right? So that's interesting. And you have MSOX, which is just like a leveraged version of it. We won't go through that. MJ, that's an ETF. This doesn't look great. It's a pretty long red bar, but it's also just an inside bar. So, right, it's like that's important to understand. Didn't make a new high, so it's not like a false breakout per se, but also didn't make a new low, just kind of consolidating here. Now, what I'll say is that candle is at 469. So those are your levels, 469 to 610, and that's your daily chart. And the monthly is green, but building a huge upper wick. Week also green. Weed, that's another ETF. Same kind of idea here where things didn't completely collapse, but I'd say also not super bullish. And you have Pot X, another ETF. In this case, yeesh, that is, I believe, nope, not a bearish outside bar, but pretty much there, right? This is the kind of situation where you would expect it to sort of, quote unquote, close the deal on Monday, like kind of finish it, right? Like get below this low here, like around that four, basically call it $14 even. Now the four that were more bullish that kind of stood out are CuraLeaf, right? So this is your daily on CuraLeaf. Obviously, very difficult to trade within this day. You would have gotten chopped up big time. But the important point is this stayed in the upper end of the range. Same thing for Truelieve. I mean, much higher up in the range even. Excuse me. That first one was Cresco Labs. This is CuraLeaf. Same idea. And Green Thumb Industries. Same idea. Look at this lower wick. These are all daily charts. And if we kind of look at let's say, look at the weekly chart for Green Thumb. Look at it took out all these lows. Now, obviously, we want to see follow through, but that's very promising. This itself is a higher low than this kind of thing after this really drastic drawdown. CuraLeaf, same kind of idea, really, except in this case, this is a new low. Took out all of these versus that other one was a higher low. Truelieve, that was your new low that week. Almost took out these other ones. You would expect that it's going to come up here and sweep 15. I'm going to play that actually. I mean, the risk reward here is pretty is promising. And Cresco, that's a nice swing low. So 2 green weeks in a row actually after this kind of pullback. And this looks like it's making a run to 440. So another dollar of upside on a 340 stock. That's also worth playing. I'm going to look for a way to look into getting into that in some more detail. So that's the lay of the land for the cannabis. Most of it, really, honestly, is kind of petering out after that 1 day move, which makes it a little bit risky to kind of jump into individual names because generally you want to have wind at your back across like an entire sector. But there may be some idiosyncratic plays potentially, especially if the risk reward presents itself right on the lower time frames, like the stop loss, etc. So we'll see.